And council affirmation. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kine kine ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tai, ehi akia nā te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, tihei mauriora. Let us today affirm that we will, as councillors, work together to serve the citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of Selwyn District and its communities. We will. Thank you, everyone. We have apologies today from Sophie and from Deborah for lateness. I'll move that we accept those as seconder. Bob, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Identification of any extraordinary business. There's been nothing raised. Sharon? No. There's no further conflicts of interest anyone wants to raise that haven't already been recorded? Nope. Public forum, there is none today. And so we have a confirmation of minutes from council meeting on the 21st and the 28th of May. Is there a mover and seconder for those minutes? Malcolm, thank you. Seconder? Shane, thanks. And we can have a talk about them. Grant, you got something?
I was present. I'm not noted as being present in the 21st of May.
Cool, we can add that. Lydia?
It was just around the Upper Selwyn Hutso on page 10 of my agenda. It doesn't note there around the change from 3 to 6 months for the licence holders in arrears. So it shows that there, but it shows as moved by Councillor Epihart and seconded by Councillor McInnes.
And you want to have, what do you want in there?
Well, my recollection was that I had moved to the 6 months.
Oh, so the amendment through that.
Please.
Yep.
Thank you.
Therese, we can make sure that amendment was added through. Cool. Thanks, Lydia. And Nicole.
And I've already spoken to Therese about this, but I actually was out of the room for the last part of that vote. And so she's already recorded that with her, what she's done.
Cool. Thanks, Nicole. And Megan.
The 21 May meeting, just noting it said apologies none, but I was an apology for early departure for the citizenship ceremony.
That's right. Thank you. With those changes to the minutes, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. And just note, I guess, that last council meeting we did have to leave, Megan. It was a long meeting that we had here. And I guess just a reminder for us, and this is much for me as chair of this, that we do have standing orders and we try and let conversation happen as it needs to. But just remember that we generally want to be speaking once to items. We're not coming back to councillors for a second round or second go at things, and that's been made a little bit tricky with the change in microphone use and things, but just a reminder today, if you can please just leave your microphone on till you're finished, and we won't be coming back for a second time round, so just patience on pressing that button for the second time. Thank you. The next item is my Mayor's report, so that's in there for your information. There's been a couple of really good things happen with Minister Erica Stanford come and with her announcements around education. There's a lot of work that I've been doing with the school principals to highlight the needs in Selwyn, and property and classrooms was a part of that. Teacher release, extra student support, and things that were raised from both our smallest schools and our biggest schools have been a part of that. And so it's really great to have Minister Stanford not only come down last year to hear those things face to face, but then come back 6 months later and deliver the announcements around land and classrooms for our education in our district. The Mayoral Relief Fund has been supported by central government, and so Minister Mark Mitchell has announced some support for us there. There's a paper for confirmation in the CE's report today, but great to have that extra level of national support for the work that's ongoing, and for those of you that are living and seeing the spaces that are still pretty muddy and wet. There's ongoing hardship caused by not only that flooding event, but the ongoing nature of a pretty wet season since then as well. And noting there just the Kiwi Rail quarterly meeting that we have some correspondence that has come in and out, and then a list of the meetings that are there. So I'll move that you receive that report. Is there a seconder? Malcolm, thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions on if people have got some things they'd like to ask. Elizabeth.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. In terms of the Mayoral Fund for the flood damage, just wonder if you're able to give us an update of how many people have applied for that. And also, I've been wanting something to release out to my community to give them some update on where they can go to apply for this.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if we could have a follow up with that, and all the councillors could maybe receive that sort of link to forward on to their communities. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. There was a media release that was sent out, so we can resend that to the councillors that had all the information in it. I do know that we have received some responses to that and queries around it. We haven't had a meeting yet of looking at those, because that'll be dependent on today's announcement around Jess and Malcolm and myself being the people to make those decisions. So yes, there has been interest. People do want support, but we'll know. Oh, Sharon, you know, there's been 11 have come back so far. Thanks, Elizabeth. Nicole.
Thank you. And obviously with your Mayor's report, you're visiting schools. There are also some councillors who went to those,
Yes.
some of those as well.
Yes.
Just whether this is appropriate to bring up about the Audit and Risk Committee update that we weren't able to give at the last meeting just because issues with emails and such like. And Annalisa was here but then had to leave. So did you want me to say about that
You touch
now?
on now. That'd be good.
So we had at our last meeting, and obviously we only meet quarterly. So we had a health, safety and wellbeing updates, and we talked about critical risks, site visits and walkarounds, and an increase in aggressive behaviour incidents. Audit New Zealand plan, so had new director Derek Olsen work through the plan to adopt by 31st October, and the key risk areas and areas that have caused delays in the past, evaluations, invested assets. Internal audit in relation to sensitive expenditure findings in relation to GL, classification reporting, policy amendments, risk management strategy and update, and legal update covering Lagoima policy reviews and legal training. And so that was Annalisa's summary on that, who's our chair.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, and thanks to the councillors who have come to those school visits. It's a great way to understand some of the needs in the local community, hear from principals, teachers, kids and parents who are dropping their kids off or picking them up at the same time as well. Lydia.
I just looking at your advocacy correspondence, and a few months ago you and I wrote to Minister Seymour and Minister Sanford around rural school bus funding. Have you heard anything?
I've heard nothing back on school buses.
Okay, thanks.
Although this isn't directly to me, but I'm aware that Mayor Nick Smith in Nelson has been talking about how regional council funding and school bus funding needs to be thought about quite differently than it is now. So, yeah, not direct to me, but aware of some broader conversations the government needs to have. Yeah, we'll get to that at the point. Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour of receiving my report say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Sharon, your report.
Thank you, Sam. So Chief Executive's report for information, and included in that is the pre-election report, which is a statutory requirement. Please, just as a reminder, the statement of intent for Orion was in your resource, and really you're just required to receive that, but it's there for your reading, and it will be published on the 30th of June. In terms of, as Sam just approached before, you will see attached is the documents around the Mayoral Relief Disbursement Committee, so we're seeking approval for that. In terms of Selwyn Awards, so that is coming up early August, and that's really great to see the confirmed sponsors taking up the sponsorship for that, and a record number of applications, which is fantastic. We've just put a little taster around Selwyn comparative analysis. So next week for council briefing, we'll have our performance team will provide some overviews of some of our data and analysis next Wednesday, and that will be a public streamed session, and so we're looking forward to that. So that just gives you a little bit of a taster of what is to come. And you may or may not have seen it, but I did send an email around earlier just to highlight to you, and I did indicate I would bring it in as a verbal component of my report. I want to say thank you to Vanessa and Head of Department for Building Services. She's working with the team to bring forward a number of submissions. There's a lot of legislation out there at the moment, and submissions that are requiring councils to respond to. So I've indicated that she'll be bringing through submissions for council endorsement on building and construction and building product specifications. However, I just wanted to flag that Vanessa and the team have had a look at the regulatory standards bill, and there isn't really anything of sufficient detail in the bills that impacts councils, and we don't see any real benefit for us to be putting in a submission at this stage. So I just wanted to highlight that and just get your guidance that you would be happy with that approach, because these are due to be submitted on the 23rd of June. But I have sent an email to you to that effect.
Cool. Thank you, Sharon. Are there any comments people have got of the report, or any questions of Sharon and the team? Elizabeth.
On our page 56, if we're having a look at the local projects, just want some clarification. Are all of these in the long-term plan, or some of them are just additional? So we've got in the Ellesmere ward, we've got the Leeston War Memorial restoration, Coast Ford Wetland Development, and then obviously Rolleston Youth Space Toilet. Just the budgets for those.
So those are transferred from the long-term plan. So that was what was agreed in.
Okay. Yep. All right. Just wanted clarification on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move your report, Sharon. Is there a seconder? Malcolm, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thank you. The next item is annual plan 25-26. Welcome, Steve and Alison.
Tēnā koutou mea, councillors. On behalf of the team, we're here today to present to you our draft annual plan for adoption, and I'm just going to walk through the cover report and just highlight a couple of the key points. Then we've got the team here who can answer any questions that you may have. I guess the core of today is we're looking to adopt the draft annual plan for 25-26 financial year, which is attached as Appendix A to this. That is also setting the rates from 1 July to 30 June for the coming year as well. We want to, as well, in recommendation E, authorise the Chief Executive and the Chief Financial Officer to make any non-material or editorial changes, and we are aware that there have been a couple as people have been reading through this quite significant document. And that they can be dealt with after this meeting, but before we publicly release this. So that is the intent of that recommendation. And as you received this morning, we also circulated around a procedural recommendation, which is sitting in front of you at the moment, which is around applying rates penalties, and that is highlighted on the screen above, which is essentially applying a charge of 5% on so much of any instalment for rates other than targeted rates for metered water supply set on differential basis that has been assessed after 1st of July 2025 and which is unpaid and due to be added on the following dates. And that talks about the 4 instalment dates, and that previous rates other than targeted rates for metered water supplies set on a differential basis, including penalties assessed on or prior to 1 July 2025 and which remain unpaid on 1 July 2025, will have a further 5% added on 1 July 2025. So apologies for missing that into this paper. As I say, it's an annual procedural recommendation, and it is now up on the screen for you. The background to this decision today begins with the adoption of the long-term plan last year, and following that decision, which is noted on page 2 of the cover report, was the decision on the 13th of November, which Council passed to not consult on the annual plan. And those resolutions are covered in the paper and the rationale for that. The annual plan contains the budget for financial year ending 25-26, and it sets out and it uses the LTP as our starting point, and it incorporates those changes which were agreed to on the 13th of November. It also sees increasing fees, charges and development contributions by inflation, again as signalled in the long-term plan. It ensures that the levels of service are maintained and that there are no changes to levels of service. And it includes a review and rephasing of the capital program to enable delivery within a changing and quite dynamic project management environment. Fundamentally, none of these changes and amendments are considered significant or material. The proposal to adopt this annual plan is following the significant feedback we had from the community, and Council has a responsibility for our community now and for the future communities to maintain our assets. And as you'll know in reading the annual plan, over 80% of our expenditure goes on that core and essential infrastructure, and approximately 70 to 75% of that goes through operating expenditure on those same essential services. As you can appreciate, that's quite challenging when Selwyn is the fastest growing council and district in the country. And that is evidenced by the 165% growth in our population over the last 20 years. That is a challenge for this council and previous councils to keep pace with, and we have matched that challenge in this annual plan. We have also had to address cost escalation issues, much like many in our community have and many contractors and partners have, and that's been included in the plan too. And I guess what we've been able to do today is bring back to an annual plan that proposes a rates increase of 14.2% to achieve and maintain those levels of service and keep pace with growth. It maintains and includes an investment program in infrastructure and facilities of $145.8 million, and it includes $236.6 million of operating expenditure. So the recommendation today is for those reasons that Council adopts this. The reasons are that this will allow Council to meet its statutory obligations under the Local Government Act to prepare and adopt an annual plan for the financial year 30 June 2026, comply with Council's resolution on 13th November 2024 to prepare an annual plan based on year 2 of that LTP, and proceed with implementing the adopted annual plan from 1 July 2025. So that is the paper. Sam, happy to pass back to you.
Great, thank you. Councillors, any thoughts or questions on the paper in front? We need a mover and seconder for what's there. Moved Malcolm, seconded Shane. Thanks. Any comments that people have or questions that they'd like to raise or views they want to share? Elizabeth?
I'm just trying to find the right page for it, but my understanding is that we've kept the rates. There's a 16% cap. Are we assured that there are no rural ratepayers that are going to be going above that 16%? Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I guess I would probably like to speak to it. I'm not going to vote for this today because for me it's more that I'm doing so as a protest vote because I didn't agree with the long-term plan, therefore I don't agree with the budget set in the annual plan. In terms of the annual plan, yes, it just sails on from the long-term plan, and that's my reason predominantly why I won't be voting for this.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Anyone else? Grant?
I'd just like to check the CFO's response to that last question. If you go to page 128 of your diligent boards and look at rural without water races and 11 water units, their rate rises are predicted to be 19.3%. So clearly they're over 16%. My understanding was over the whole district, no one would pay more than 16%, or the averages.
Thanks, Grant. We will double check that and come back to you, if that's okay, and we'll get back to you this afternoon.
On a similar vein, we hear the majority of expenditure is being directed to water and sewage services. A number of rural ratepayers are asking me, why is it when the majority of expenditure is target rated to water and services, yet we're paying more than the average? So if you look at a lifestyle unit without water or sewage, they're paying 14.6% increase in 25-26 versus a residential with sewage of 13.8, which is under the 14.2 average. So they're sort of saying, well, hang on a minute, I haven't got those services that are taking a lot of our costs. Why am I paying over the average? So I don't expect you to answer that now, but there's a question I think would be helpful to the wider community. I, like Elizabeth, will not be voting for this on principle because I didn't vote for non-consultation at the annual plan. I think we've missed an opportunity where we should have been going through this line by line like other councils and trying to minimise our rates increases. I don't think we've done that with any sense of urgency. I realise that's democracy. I got voted out, but I'm with Elizabeth on principle. I won't be voting for it.
Thanks, Grant. Megan?
Kia ora koutou. So I take a different approach because I wasn't actually part of the long-term plan hearing or deliberations and decision-making there. But I do fully support the decision not to consult, and I support that because I think that this does ultimately reflect the long-term plan, and any of the changes proposed are minor and they don't materially affect the overall direction that was set by the long-term plan. And even though I wasn't part of that hearing, I am going to back my colleagues around this table that made those decisions for this district. And I think that by not going out for consultation and following through actually enables really sound and long-term decision-making and provides a continuity of service and stability for council decision-making and council services. I think it also avoided unnecessary costs and administrative effort to engage in formal consultation where we were already brought into a long-term plan process the year before. And I have reviewed this annual plan and I found that there is nothing really surprising or unexpected. And I note that there's no specific initiatives or dedicated funding towards mana whenua or taumutu communities. But it does have the adoption of the bicultural strategy, or funding put aside for the implementation of the bicultural strategy. And I think that that's primarily an internal focus strategy that enables council capability to strengthen the relationships with mana whenua. And so my general impression of this plan is that it lays an essential foundation for better engagement moving forward with mana whenua. And it's a good framework to build on, and I think it does reflect the long-term plan decisions that that you all adopted and that I, as your colleague, support.
Kia ora, Megan. Lydia.
I'd like to acknowledge the staff for actually responding to every single one of my 25 recommendation points I gave you for the annual plan, so I'm pleased to see some of those incorporated. I guess what still doesn't sit right with me is that we didn't have a chance to respond and reflect to the current pressures in analysing this annual plan and reviewing it. And if we talk about, maybe not going out for consultation, I didn't agree with that. I think we should have done that. But I looked around the country and I saw there were lots of other councils that hadn't gone out for consultation, yet they had still reviewed their annual plan and came back with savings and value for their community. And so, from my perspective, I sit a little disappointed to not have that opportunity to do so. When we talk about risk in the report that we have in front of us, we talk about reputational damage with our central government relationships, and it sort of leads me to think, well, what's our reputational damage with our community by not going out for consultation? And, I recognise there is pain and growth, but I still think that we could do better. The data around the average rates per person is quite an interesting point for me. I've done that data through the representation review, and so it is quite interesting when you look at it in the fact that, say, a rural family of 4 could be paying $50,000 in rates for their property, and an urban family of 4 could be paying $5,000. And so when you look at the really low number I just start to look at that data a little bit differently and how we do that. And so I think it's great that further down the track, this is digressing a little, sorry, that we are going to go through a rates review and how we charge rates. So I'm pleased that we are heading down that path to look at this. But I didn't support not going out for consultation, and we could have done better. We could have reviewed this and had a chance to do our jobs, but that wasn't the way. But I can't agree with this. I was also quite surprised to see our engage and inform with our community had gone out before we'd adopted this. So that was I guess a little bit of a surprise for me to see that on social media.
Thanks, Lydia. Anyone else have anything they wanted to add or say?
Thank you, Sam. Tēnā rā tātou katoa, re mihi ana, kia koutou manawatia mātariki. E rau mana whenua e Megan, te pau o te naitiru I hiki ki taumotu, tēnā koe, e koromatua Sam, kai whakahaere e Sharon, kai mahi, kai kaunihira rohe o ai kirikiri, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Shane epe ha tōku ingoa. First of all, I guess I'd like to acknowledge the work, the tremendous amount of work that's being undertaken under the current pressures being put on staff and council, and also the continued scrutiny through the prudence of my colleagues as well. Most certainly appreciate the work that goes into looking and relooking and trying to find these savings. What you've produced is certainly what this council agreed upon to be delivered. Whilst there might be divergent views, we are looking at the summary of that information. Since I've been a councillor over the past sort of 6 years, I still feel sorry for is the rural communities, I guess, and Grant's raised it every time around what services they can expect, or what more services they can expect with rates increases, and the simple answer is that, well, there is no really simple answer, I don't want to say it, but I'm glad also that potentially there will be a rates review into the future to look at those equitable services. I do feel for our mana whenua community as well. With one representative, it's often difficult, and I appreciate the work that goes into collaboration through this council to bring those views to the table, and often reflect on the advocacy that other communities bring to this table here to submit to council, and the the not very much that we hear from our mana whenua. So I hope that by adopting this annual plan, and that by adopting the rate, that it will be useful in providing equitable services to more of our remote communities, including mana whenua. What I see in this annual report has been clearly said that 75% is in maintenance renewals and capital projects, which we've all asked for. The growth of the district drives a lot of the need to keep things up and running and maintaining it. We've got 30,000 more people than when I first got here, I think, or close to 25,000 more people, with the largest store pack and save in the South Highlands. So I'm not wanting to make light of that figure by any means, but the reality is that there is so many more people, and there will be so many more coming. I hope that the councillors of the future also recognise that. And I just did wonder if by not adopting the annual plan means that you don't agree to any capital expenditure for our district. But that's not a question for me, because I do support it. Again, I feel for the communities. But tautoko e ngā kōrero, kia kaha, ngā mihi.
Okay, thanks, Shane. So thank you for everyone's comments on today, and for staff presenting and sharing the work that's gone on over a long period of time. We have consulted widely with our community on the contents of this report. 1,500 submissions 12 months ago shows that people are engaged in what they want us to deliver. And I hear a lot that councils can be slow, and councils take too long to deliver things. And the decision we made to ensure that we could actually do the things last year that we said we would do as a part of our commitment to a community to keep things moving and to be a council that works for our community. We've managed to, I think, work smarter and think harder about what we're doing. And Sharon and Steve, you guys have talked about how we've kept within what we said to the community we would around rates increases for this year. And no one wants costs to go up. I don't want our rates increase to go up like they are now. And I don't think anyone around the council table said, oh, goody, it's not what we want to see happen. We need costs to come down for our community. But inflation and insurance and audit and all manner of costs that we also have to fund are a reality for us, and not investing in our community's future is just repeating the mistakes of the last 30 years, where councils across the country haven't invested in road and water infrastructure, which has left us with the reforms in water that we're faced with today. Everyone's welcome to make their vote for and vote against. That's part of the democracy around this table. When you support the annual plan, you support everything that's in it. And being a councillor, that's hard, because there's things in there that you might not want to happen. There's stuff in there that you might disagree with. Being a councillor is complex, it's nuanced. There's things where you have wins and losses. There's times when you feel like it's going your way, and there's times when you feel like it's not. And an annual plan is never going to be one person's answer that they want. This isn't Bob's annual plan, it's not Elizabeth's annual plan, it's not Sam's annual plan, it's our council's. It's a multitude of voices, it's our community's annual plan. We have all those voices feeding into this. And so when we think about the governance decision that we make today, when we say yes, we're saying yes to all those things. And I guess too, when you're saying no to all those things as well. That says no to any more water improvements or road end improvements over the next 12 months. No to supporting whakarau or the Sheffield pool transfer. No to the economic development strategy, to the Lincoln Centre upgrade, to Foster Park, to the large-scale park, to Prebbleton Community Centre, to the things that we say, it's like a yes and a no vote. It seems like it's a very binary way of trying to be yes and no to an annual plan. There's lots of stuff that we're doing here that is really good, and I get that the piece around cost is really the driver behind a lot of this. And thank you for the work that's gone into to keep those costs within what we said they would be. It was raised before, we do have the lowest rates per person in Canterbury. That is that's new data. That's not something that's been widely talked about, and we've often focused on what the rate increase is, and the rates increase as a percentage is the highest in Canterbury. So it's the stories that get told around what we're doing. If you start from a low base and we all put our rates up $200, if we were starting from the lowest base, we would still have the highest rates increase because we're starting from the lowest base. Our rates are cheaper for people living in Selwyn than they are for people living in other places. And this year, it's been talked about 80% of our capital infrastructure, capital spent on our essential infrastructure. I think this year, last week we heard it was 90%. This year, it's 90% of all of our capital is on our roads and on our water supplies. Those are the two things that I hear our community saying: we want better roads, we want better water supplies, we want to make sure that when we flush the toilet, it's dealt with in an environmentally sensible manner. And so I congratulate the staff for ensuring that our council is focused on those essential services that our community continues to ask for. There will be, as we vote on this and then think about the implementation, I think we need to think about how we continue to tell the work that's going on from council. And so part of this is the communication and the feedback. And I like that this annual plan not only talks about what we're about to do, but the things that we have done over the last 12 months. There's been some really good outcomes for the community, and I want to thank all the councillors who have been a part of each of those outcomes. There's been a lot of them, so I'm not going to single them out, but sometimes it's the decision that's made here, and sometimes it's been your work in your local towns and in your wards, making sure that these things happen. So thank you for the work that you've been involved in over that. I think that covers it for me. Sharon, did you have anything else you wanted to add? Steve, thank you for presenting it. We'll come to the vote. It's been moved and seconded. There's one change, actually, I do need to highlight. Malcolm and Shane, if you're okay, it had 1 July to... It had 1 June to 30th of July, and it needed to be 1 July to 30th of June in bullet point D. It's highlighted in yellow above my head or on the screen. So all those in favour, say aye. Aye. Anyone against, say no. Declare it carried. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Alison, for bringing that to us.
Could I have my vote recorded, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Can you just record Grant's vote? Did anyone else want their vote recorded? Yep. Those against too. We now have the local Water Done Well water services delivery plan. Welcome, Tim Mason.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, councillors. Today we are looking for council to adopt the water service delivery plan, and we're also looking to authorise the Chief Executive Officer to make minor changes to the water service delivery plan to allow for certification. Just a brief recap following on from last week. I'll just reiterate some key points in regard to the plan. There's a one-off transitional requirement under the water services reform. There's no new information in this plan, and it's made up of information provided previously to council, mostly in the long-term plan, the Five Waters Asset Management Plan, and the 30-year infrastructure strategy. It's not meant to be an operations manual for how the WISCO is going to operate, and that will happen during the development of the water services strategy. We've been working alongside DIA, and we've had positive feedback in regard to the direction that we're travelling in regard to the plan. And Simpson Grierson have also confirmed a level of comfort with the plan from a legal perspective. Approval of the plan today is an important step We need to give effect to the decision made by Council on the 2nd of April to establish a WISCO with a phased transition through to the 1st of July. From the 1st of July through to the 20th of December this year. So given we've recently had a briefing only last week, I'll probably leave it at that unless there's anything you would like to add at this point, Alex.
No, I think you covered that very well.
I'll pass back to you then, Sam.
Thank you. Do we have a mover and seconder for this report? Shane, seconded Malcolm. And first speaker, Elizabeth.
Just noticed on our page 6 of your 135, you've got investment to meet the levels of service, regulatory standards and growth needs. I guess we're probably not fixed on those topics at the moment, particularly around the regulatory standards. Is that correct? There's still more information to come back regarding that. So does this, even though we're voting for this water services delivery plan, there's still a lot of flexibility in this going forward. Is that correct?
I think that's correct. I think the document as Tim outlined, it's just, it's a bit of an exercise to demonstrate that, we're soft. And, there's plenty of work that still need to be done. And some of that will be covered under the strategy, but also some of the other regulations that will come later on.
Thank you. Megan.
Kia ora. So I don't have a vote, but I do have a voice. So I thought I'd just follow up on what we talked about in the workshop last week. And I started then, I'll start again by saying I do acknowledge the really significant amount of work that's gone into the Water Services Delivery Plan. And I believe that we all have a common shared goal here, which is to improve the water, drinking water and wastewater services for our community. And so I really genuinely believe we're heading in the right direction. And as the mana whenua representative around this table, my key concern and my deep commitment is to ensure that our marae and our community receives these essential services that the rest of the district also receives. And the reason I say that and I focus on this is because our marae is more than just a place for us. It's a vibrant cultural and educational hub that hosts thousands of visitors every single year. And a few years ago, we did a review of all of our marae usage to try and determine who's coming to visit us, and because we're fully booked, and how is our marae being used. And 97% of use was Selwyn community members, not us using our marae. Our whānau can't get booked into the marae because the marae is fully booked by Selwyn community coming to have an experience with the Indigenous culture. And that's something to be really celebrated, that this community really genuinely wants to engage. But at the same time, it puts pressure on us to deliver those services for the community, and we spent $860,000 ourselves to have a wastewater system and $150,000 for a water bore so that we could provide drinking water. And this is our service we give to a community, and you can look up our public records and you can see we have, I think, a maximum of $5 million in the bank, and we're spending this money for this community, and yet we don't get the same level of service as the rest of the community. And so that was the motivator in actually engaging the conversation last week, and it remains my motivator. So it's really, I really want to see that we have modern, reliable water, drinking water and wastewater services for the marae where it currently is, and for a new marae, because we've outgrown our place and we have more visitors than we can actually handle at the moment. But how the decisions are made around those services are just as important as the services themselves. And so for us, really transparent and clear endorsement from this council will build a foundation of trust that this community can say, these people made this decision and it's the right decision for Selwyn. So last week I raised concerns about the inclusion of the $11 million for Taumatu wastewater and drinking water. And the reason I did it is because the document was probably the first time that I was really clearly able to see how truly underserviced the Taumatu community is. And it just highlighted a scale of underservice that sat uncomfortably with me, and as I've talked to my colleagues, sat a bit uncomfortably with them as well. Since last week, Council has gone and got some advice to say, look, how was that decision made? And my summary of that advice, or certainly what I've took away from it, is two key points. That although Taumata wastewater funding was discussed and seemed to be removed during the long-term plan process, no formal decision was made to do that. And that the Water Services Delivery Plan is separate from the LTP, and it's governed by different rules, and therefore it does not legally commit Council to adopt specific capital projects. So we're not at any legal risk. So if now we've been advised that there's no legal barrier to adopting this document, and I accept that position. I accept the legal advice around that. And not only that, I do back the people. When I'm in governance, I back my fellow governors, and if you guys make decisions, I lean into them. And I might not always agree with them, but I go out and I back you. So you made the decision, I'm here to back you. And what I'm really keen to take forward, I just wanted to explain that I've changed my position and I've got a real willingness to move forward. At the same time, I would like this to convert into a really good discussion with the Water Services CCO about how Taumutu can be well serviced for wastewater and drinking water, and convert it into a real practical solution for us in our communities. So I'm really committed to working positively forward to build those relationships and have a really genuine partnership. We have a great genuine partnership between mana whenua and council, and I believe that that can continue over into the Water Services Company. So I just wanted to explain my change in position.
Thank you, Megan.
Kia ora, Megan. Thank you, and I can confirm your interpretation of the legal position is correct. And Alex, maybe you want to speak a little bit to how you'd see things going forward in regard to engagement with the WSCO.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, I think that point that was made before in terms of, this document provides a bit of modelling to demonstrate the future sustainability of the model. Also outlines, the intended kind of operating model. However, further planning will be undertaken through the water services delivery strategies, and that will provide, I think, a really good opportunity for everyone, the CCO, the council, and the community to engage and kind of review that. I think it's a really exciting opportunity, and as I said, personally speaking, for me and the team, everyone is, determined to do the best we can for the community.
Thank you. Nicole.
Yeah, thanks for that, Megan. It's good to hear your views and those of your community, so thank you. This is something I brought up last week, but I just wanted, since that was a briefing, I just wanted to bring it up now. And it was around, I'd asked for that the Water Services CCO, their own discharge limits, have their own higher limits than what are resource consent limits, and my understanding from what I was told last week is that that's something for the statement of intent, and you guys are still of that view. Excellent, thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Grant.
A couple of questions from page 321 about our borrowing limits. I guess they would be maybe for the CFO or for Alex. Bullet point 3, SDC plan debt lower than 220% of total revenue. When you're saying total revenue, that's not group revenue. That will be the amended SDC revenue minus the water services income?
I believe that's correct, but I'll
Alison,
I'll listen to it.
Sorry, Grant, which page were you referring to?
321 of diligent. Second question is the last bullet point, and it's more a query for the governors more than anything else. It says that the council does not currently have a specific limit for water's debt. In the absence of that, the WSCO have used a 500% debt to revenue ratio. As a matter of oversight, should we take a bit more control and set an upper limit a bit lower for instance, in the first instance where the WISCO comes back to us as a check-in mechanism rather than having unfettered access to 500% of debt to revenue. Right, well, I'm posing that question to you is or maybe from an operational point of view, it's great to have access to 500%. As me as a governor, I'm saying maybe that ain't such a great idea. Maybe I want you to come back and ask me. Have you got a reply to that?
Yes, Grant, I think you are correct. I mean, that what we're presenting here is the opportunities and the options we have, but in terms of how we operate, there will be an ongoing discussion with the council. We got a workshop coming up in August, which I think will provide a good opportunity to get into the nuts and bolts of this.
So I imagine this projection of debt levels going forward, it may be, that 250% or 300% may not be reached for years 7, 8, 9 or 10, which might be a natural check-in place to come back to the council and say, let's increase our debt if we're required to then, rather than having carte blanche.
Certainly. I mean, I think that it's been reflected around this room. The intention is to, maintain and improve what we do, and that's across the board, from services to, our financial acumen and the way that we engage. So I think those three kind of pillars have been clearly identified, and we'll continue to work on that until we get it right. But your assumption is correct, Grant.
And I'll just get Alison to confirm, Grant, the 220%, Alison?
Yes, I mean, Grant, this is reported back through to finance performance as well, and also to audit and risk. So, I mean, our treasury limit is 220 versus LGFA 280% just now. Water would have access to the 500% once a full water services CCO is established, but it's not a target, it's making sure that the programme is managed appropriately and we fund that accordingly.
I think the question was around the residual 220% for council is for... You can come back in, Grant.
The question was, I'm assuming our revenue will decrease significantly post the water and sewages going, so our total amount we can draw down will decrease in pro rata, won't it?
Yeah, the mix of the debt. So, I mean, the associated debt that sits with water would ultimately move into the water services CCO, which would change our debt profile by virtue of that moving. But bearing in mind, we would consolidate all of that back up at a group level as well.
So, as an example, in the 10-year LTP, currently it's forecast that we'll have $634 million of debt in year 10, but the distribution of that debt in year 10 will be something like, let's say, 200 million at SDC and 400 million at the WISCO.
Yeah, absolutely. The mix will change dependent on where it sits, but we will also be consolidating that back up at group level, so it's not moving it from one backyard to another.
But the liability for that WISCO debt will lie with the targeted ratepayers, and the majority of the SDC debt will be general ratepayers.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Lydia.
I just had a couple of questions on the plan here, and so in my mind, some of it is where's the contingency plan, and if inflation and regulatory changes and supply chain constraints significantly increase our capital expenditure, and one part in there just brought up around emergency planning and integration for Selwyn Water Limited, that the emergency service levels are quite outdated. So my question is when would you look to review this document, noting that some of the stuff is dated in here, and how would you do that? Is that consultation, or is that Selwyn Water finding efficiencies as a business unit?
I think it's all of the above, Lydia. This document essentially, the adoption of this document allows Sharon to certify the document and to go back to the IA to say, yep, the assumptions we made, when we make the decision to establish a CCO were correct from a financial perspective. So that gives us the green light to then get into the detailed work that you suggested. So there is all stuff that we need to do. We have established a transition phase between 1st of July and 20th of December 2025 to allow us time to work through all of that detail.
So would we see something come back to us after those efficiencies have...
So what I would say is the water service delivery plan is a point in time. document with regards to the legislation, and the next step is the water strategy that the water CCO will pull together, and that's actually the next important link, which then wraps up everything that you're asking about. So I would envisage that the CCO will bring or come and have a discussion with council with regards to the water strategy, and I'll look to Julie or Mike, who's online, to if you want to articulate that better than I have done.
Yeah, happy to say. So part of how they will consult and engage with us will be part of their Statement of Expectations workshop, and can be fed into that around the water strategy. So as Sharon said, this is just a point in time. The enduring settings are under that water services strategy, and the Statement of Expectations will be in place with council's expectations set prior to that document being prepared.
Thank you, everyone, for the questions and the comments on that piece. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thank you, Alex and Tim. The next paper is yours as well. So we have the local water done well establishment decisions.
Thanks, Sam. So today we are looking at Block 2 establishment decisions and asking Council to approve entry into the Operational Delivery Agreement, the Transitional Services Agreement, and the Working Capital Facility Agreement. We're also asking to delegate to the CE the power to execute these agreements, and we're recommending the disestablishment of the Local Water Done Well subcommittee effective from today. There are several key steps we need to take to give effect to the decision made by Council on the 2nd of April to establish the WISCO, and the approval of these transitional documents are one of those key steps to support our continued momentum and achieve the directed timeframes. There are other important decisions that have already been made or are pending, the establishment of the Constitution, and incorporation of the WISCO to deliver water services. That decision was taken on the 21st of May. We have just had the discussion around the water service delivery plan, and a little bit later, probably in August, September, early August, we'll be looking at the Statement of Expectations and approval of the transfer agreement. And we've committed to workshop that Statement of Expectations in late July to early August. In regard to the phased transition, the paper outlines the benefits of the phased transition while identifying the concerns raised by Council during the briefing. They've been addressed, specifically relating to updating service descriptions in the Operational Delivery Agreement, and validation of the requested up to 9 million working capital facility, which we will be drawn down as and when required. The Operational Delivery Agreement and Transitional Services Agreement, these are updated, but they're largely unchanged since the briefing on the 4th of June. It's important to note, I guess, that those documents will also terminate on final transfer, and any ongoing shared services that may be required at that time will be the subject of a new paper that will be brought to Council. The Working Capital Agreement is unchanged since the briefing, and the disestablishment of the Local Water Done Well subcommittee, Council made the decision that all WISCO decisions are decisions of full Council. So the appropriate option at this time is to disestablish the subcommittee with effect from this council meeting. So that's in summary, and Sam, I'll hand back to you.
Great, thank you. Mover and seconder for this work. Malcolm, thank you. Seconder. Bob, thank you. Any comments or questions on the set of papers? Megan.
Kia ora. Earlier this month we had the opportunity to look at the transitional arrangements, and the key question that I asked, well, I asked a number of questions, but the real key one that I was most interested in was who retains governance responsibility until the final asset transfer. And I just want to make sure that I understand that the answer correctly. But from what I heard, it was that this council will retain governance oversight until the final asset transfer has occurred. And I just wanted that to confirm three parts or three things, like who holds governance oversight at each stage of the transition up until the final asset transfer, and then how will those governance and accountability arrangements between council and the water CCO happen in a phase kind of handover way or otherwise, and then at what point exactly does it change into the arrangements that we're more used to looking at, which is we have a letter of expectation and governance decisions made there and not here.
Thanks, Megan. And for my understanding is that it remains with council until the transfer, but I might pass over to my colleague Julie to answer that more fully.
So governance responsibility, so there are two sets of governance responsibilities, right? And what I think we're turning on is what types of governance decisions are done where. And that comes down to what are the operations of the water services entity. So while it's operating under contract, it does have its own governance responsibilities in terms of making sure that it is still financially stable, it is executing under contract, it is doing all the things that it has agreed to do, it is managing its own staffing arrangements. So anything that relates to what we're agreeing here that the organisation will do, those are their governance decisions. In terms of how the assets are maintained, setting of rates, all the normal local government governance decisions will remain with council until such time as all the assets, until we nominate and transfer full responsibility for delivery along with the assets in December. Does that answer? Correct.
I just wanted to make a change from what I'd said for the last paper. I said statement of intent, I meant statement of expectations. So sorry about that. Just to clarify, you guys probably worked it out, but just for the recording of the minutes, thanks.
Thank you. That can be done. Grant.
I was just looking at the graph talking about establishment costs, and one side there's sort of 500,000 and one page it goes up to 2 million. Which are we closest to? It looks like from the expenditure graph that we're up close to 2 million expenditure costs.
Is that the establishment cost?
Yes.
Yeah, I think as we get close to July, we'll be getting close to that.
The graph says 25th of July we're basically going to hit 2 million. I guess what I'm questioning is then, are we then going to use the $9 million working capital facility to then fund the setup costs?
Yes, the drawdown facility includes some of the business as usual costs, so there will be some services that are transferring and then some establishment activity. That's the main components of that.
So from our, as I said, from our oversight position, there will be very clear delineation between the setup costs, and so we'll eventually know what that number is. It's not likely to be 2 million, obviously, clearly we've hit that number already, so it could be 2-3 million, whatever. We will eventually understand what it costs to set the WISCO up.
Yeah, I think I'll get Alison just to comment on that one.
Thanks, Alex. Grant, just to answer your question, so the establishment costs, we've sort of been clear around what the components were. For the 9 million working capital, what we are asking the Water Services CCO to do on a monthly drawdown is itemise what areas of those expenditure, what that looks like. So to answer your question, we will have a full picture of what the overall establishment cost is versus the cost that we're actually currently already paying.
Because I have a specific question, I suppose, around cost, what likely costs might be. When we move Selwyn District Council staff to the WISCO, will we be required to pay redundancy payments, being STC, because effectively their positions are being de-established and moved to another entity? Is that a cost that we're likely to pick up?
I'll just ask the legal team, Julie.
Bill 3 actually has a provision in it in one of the schedules that says no redundancy payments where staff are transferring to substantially similar roles.
Bad news for the staff, good news for us. Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that for me, appreciate that.
Lydia.
I guess this is around the 9 million working capital, and looking at the staff costs and the people transferring over, and how is our budget going to look come 1st of July with staffing numbers and staffing budgets. So the people that are transferring over to Selwyn Water Limited, they will be paid out of the working capital here around staff costs, so overhead costs. What will that look like on our balance sheet around our staff costs? Will that look like a deficit?
No, for these things, we'll still be consolidating at a group level. So if it's a personnel cost, it'll still be a personnel cost in terms of how we consolidate it back up. So the working capital facility we'll identify, and it's similar to the point I made to Grant, so it'll be broken down between what's the associated cost for personnel, whether that be premises, insurance, etc., so it'll then be consolidated back at that functional level.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sense of this in my head around staff costs. You know, come hit September, we're looking at $500,000 a month in staff costing.
I think, Lydia, it's sort of worth noting. So, I mean, a lot of those costs is monies that we're already expensing just now through SDC. So it's been transferred through as part of a working capital facility. The only additional costs that are over and above are any potential costs for additional insurance, directors and officers, or any premises. So the cost base doesn't fundamentally change. It's only the additional cost in relation to establishment and some additional resource that will be required to operate the CCO.
Okay, cool, thank you. And I was just looking at Appendix A in there, which has got your blocks of things that you are doing and ticking off. And I run my eye over that, and because I was on the local Would Have Done Well subcommittee, there's a few things that I see that were in the subcommittee that aren't in those blocks of tasks that you're undertaking. And so I just wonder for transparency to make sure that now we're disestablishing the subcommittee, that those are transferred over into those blocks, please.
Yeah, sure, we can do that, no problem.
Thank you.
Thanks for raising that, Lydia. That's good. Elizabeth.
Yeah, so our page 410, which is, can't see it on here, sorry. So just around the working group, just wanted some clarity over this role because it's quite ambiguous for me, and which are the representatives that are requiring the information, and what information are we, what's going to be raised and given to the parties, what's already additional to what we're already receiving in council with our workshops and these meetings.
Thanks, Councillor Munn. Look, the intention of the working group is just to support a smooth transition to the WISCO. I believe the named people on the working group at this stage is Sharon, and who's the second person?
Murray, the Director for Selwyn Water.
And Murray. So they'll oversee that process and nominate any other representation as required. But really the purpose is just to support a smooth transition across to the WISCO.
So what sort of information, is that information come back to the stakeholders, which is us, and to go back to the WISCO?
I can see Julie shaking her head, so I'll pass back to Julie.
Sharon or Julie, do you want to just explain the role of the working group?
So it's a management level tool, at which point it's it's like a steering group essentially that works at a management level that says on the day-to-day tasks that we've got to complete, compiling our asset lists, doing all the doing for the transfer, it will oversee those work streams and make sure that the doing is happening at the appropriate level.
Thank you. Anyone else? No, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Lydia? Declare it carried. The next item is customer satisfaction survey. Thanks, Alex. Thank you, Tim. Nicola, hand over to you.
Excellent, and I see that we're going to get a presentation up and running Yep, so just while BPAL's working on that, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Nicola Sutton tōku ingoa. I'm the Head of Community Insights and Policy within the Community Services and Facilities team. So the purpose of this report today is to provide Council with information and insights about the satisfaction of customers with Council services. In December last year, we engaged Ask Your Team to undertake the customer satisfaction surveys, and the reason for that was to provide an independent external view about what customers were thinking. So Ask Your Team is a company that operates across Aotearoa, New Zealand and Australia, and for decades for over a decade have specialised in this kind of work. Ask Your Team have worked with a significant number of councils and local government organisations in both countries, and last year Ask Your Team conducted for this council an all of staff engagement survey called Tate Tima. The data from that survey is just one of the sources of information that was triangulated as part of the analysis and insights development. So today we have asked Chris O'Reilly from Ask Your Team to present the findings and the recommendations from the customer satisfaction surveys and work. Chris was responsible for the analysis of the data that came in and for the writing of the report and the insights and recommendations contained within that. And then following Chris's presentation, I'll speak briefly to some key points in my report, including the Council's executive leadership team's response to the recommendations, and then we'll open the floor for questions. I just want to also acknowledge Chantel, who is sitting with me. Chantel is the head of the customer services team here at Council, and her and I worked really closely on our part of bringing this customer satisfaction survey together for you. So I'll now hand over to Chris to run his presentation.
Kia ora. Thank you, Nicola. Kia ora. Thank you, Nicola, and thank you, Mayor and councillors, for the opportunity to discuss the presentation today, and thank you for the support and use of Ask Your Team. Just on top of the work that Ask Your Team is doing, we're partnering with 50 councils in NZ. Just from a personal point of view, my first job out of UC was as Marketing Director for the Hastings District Council, and my first CEO role was 30 years ago for Christchurch Transport Limited, a local activity trading enterprise, an old version of a CCO. So I have a lot of council blood in me in terms of the background. So just to explain the survey, the purpose and the objective of the work that we've done has been to look at, on three levels, what are the biggest things that we can do, or that Selwyn District Council can do, to improve the customer satisfaction in terms of the services and facilities that it's providing? What are the here and now things that can make an immediate difference to those, I guess, the barbecues or bumping into somebody in part of the community down one of the aisles of New Zealand's largest supermarket? How do we make that as positive as possible? Then we're looking at what are the short to medium term actions to make a sustainable difference to lifting the customer satisfaction across the wide range of services and facilities provided. And then towards the end, just a very quick heads up about what a future sustainable and step change operation might be in terms of being able to do that on a sustainable basis. So in this process, the Selwyn District Council has used a much more robust methodology than is normally used in these customer satisfaction processes. And it involves using multiple sources of data. Normally what happens is that you go to the community and get a broad statement of how satisfied are you with your council. And that's great, that's a start, but it doesn't give you the detail and the insights to unpick that and look at where the outliers might be. We talk about deceit of the average or beware the blend. So we've got a lot more detail, and we've gone to 5 different sources of information. So 3 of those are surveys from the community. So that's people that have used have rung up and registered, not registered, but engaged the customer services team with an inquiry. So they've been surveyed, 395 of those. There's been those that have had an inquiry or query come in that wasn't resolved by the customer services team and passed on to a department for query resolution. 527 of those. And there was also the annual customer experience survey on the community services and facilities that's been going since 2019, and just over 2,000 respondents in that. In addition to that, what was carried out was a survey of 60 people, 57 out of the 60 people that were invited, of employees that are actually providing the services and facilities to the consumer, to the customers, to your community, and asking them about their views on the perception of the customers and consumers, your community, and also what their ideas on how you could improve that. We also looked at the results from the Tatetima employee survey and looked at the results of the teams that are providing those services to identify any barriers to high performance. There's an increasing growing body of research which shows that the employee experience has a huge impact on customer experience, EX impacting on CX. So that, and it's sort of intuitively quite, I think, understandable. People are unlikely to treat anyone better than they feel treated themselves. If they're not motivated, if there's barriers to high performance, that will flow and impact. Oh, sorry. Just in background discussion, sorry. When we're looking at the results, we want to look at understanding that there's different types of consumers in the community. There's those that have been involved in community consultation, whether it's on the LTP, whether it's on a strategy around youth, a strategy around age, around playgrounds. So there's a community consultation. There's those that use and choose to use the community facilities and programs. So that's our aquatics, pools, libraries, those sorts of things. And that's by choice. Then there's people that use the council services. Often that might be a regulatory process, or it might be that they have to do that, or it might be that they may be complaining about something in terms of their rubbish not being picked up and those sorts of things. So it's important to understand that there are each of those different types of customers are likely to have, all things being equal, different levels of customer satisfaction. Some are by choice, others are less so. It's also important to understand that in terms of the hierarchy of getting a query resolved, the quicker, the better. So if you can resolve it in the first place and not have to have a query resulting, then that's great. If you can self-serve via a website or a portal or information that's available, you resolve it yourself, that's great. If you ring and have it resolved in a single call or contact with the customer services team, that's good. And then if it has to go to a department, which is more complex and longer, you've got to make sure that that's as good as possible. But ideally, you want to move that up that tree. So either not occur in the first place, and I've explained how that can occur sometimes, or being self-serving is the ideal, or being able to be solved in the first instance. So the combination of different information is just outlined graphically there. So the executive summary that we had from the analysis that went through was that there was high customer satisfaction for interactions with the customer services team, which includes the front of house here at HQ, and with the community services and facilities staff. There was a drop in satisfaction when queries required resolution and it's been passed on to a department for more complex, perhaps, queries, and with varying performances across those departments. Within those frustrations, the top three very clearly were in order of priority: a lack of progress and resolution progress on queries. Where is my query? What's happening to it? Where is it about to? Where is it going to be? When is it going to be resolved? What's the process? And that lack of clarity on the query resolution process was key. And the third level was, when we going through the process, some of the scores were not great in terms of the quality of the information provided. So in terms of the celebrations, we're just going to touch on the celebrations and then the areas for improvement. The customer services team received an overall score of 9.3 out of 10, and there were 8 questions that go to make up the definition of the customer service, of this customer satisfaction. And they were questions around being treated with respect, care, being available, understood, how efficient people were, how clear was the process, how helpful, and how good was the quality. 8 questions. And the customer services team from the customer feedback received 90 to 95% for all of those components. In terms of the customer services and facilities team and the facilities and services they provided, a score of 9 out of 10 and a range of questions of 86 to 90% for those 8 questions. When the reply has been, or the query has gone to a department or service, that customer satisfaction score averages 6.8 out of 10, and the range of the scores for those 8 goes from 64% to 87%. However, 90% of those that asked for a response or an update to the query had those successfully completed. However, obviously that by inference means that 10 out of 10% didn't. There were 4 key areas of improvement. We've touched on the level of detail and update about query resolution. Frustrations with customers and also with some staff around changes that have impact on the community and not being informed about that. And not surprisingly, in terms of the interaction and in the free text questions and answers, the biggest frustrations came when the customer felt undervalued or not listened to. The customer interaction quality, just in terms of the method of a query coming in, the email queries had the lowest customer satisfaction score. There was examples that were brought up where customers felt that there was a reluctance from department staff to come and meet when they took the opportunity to come into this facility, into the building. Whenever there's the processes and system, whenever there's a handover between different parties, there's always a risk of error or dilution of clarity around what's required. That was identified, and a common theme was around the opportunity for better use of technology and training on technology to improve on that. And then the service improvement opportunities, primarily around self-service and the quality of the website in terms of being able to self-serve. So just to give you some of those numbers, and apologies, that's probably maybe a little bit small, but there are the results from the going from left to right. It's the customer experience survey of the community services and facilities. The request for service was when it's gone to a department, and then we have the customer service survey. What we've seen in the fourth one is customer-facing staff, their views on those components. So that allows that triangulation to occur. We can have a look at what those delivering the services feel, how it's going, versus the customers and in the various areas. So what that does is it provides either insights in terms of alignment or any blind spots, but most importantly, it looks to identify with certainty where the organisation, where the council needs to focus its resource on. So if you've got council staff saying something that they feel, could be done better, and that's what the customers are saying, and that's what the colleagues are saying within the organisation, then there's a strong degree of certainty that that should be the priority. It's very difficult to do benchmarking unless you get with other councils, unless you get the same questions, methodology and context used. But just to give you a broad contextual comparison, the best that we could find in terms of publicly available information were these scores around customer satisfaction and resident satisfaction survey scores in 2022 for 5 NZ councils, city councils. And that would reinforce that those scores of 9 and 9.3 out of 10 are right at the top, and the 6.8 for the department query resolution would be sort of middling in terms of that performance. So the recommendations, as I said, 3 components. What can we do in the short term? What are some more systemic opportunities to build in a sustainable ongoing lift and continuous improvement? And then are there some step change opportunities? So the 4 priority areas of focus, and this is about the here and now. The first one, closing the loop. When the query resolution comes in, making sure that we are focusing and reporting and measuring the time and quality of resolution. I mentioned in the feedback from those that were responding to the request for queries, there were, I think, around about 317 free text comments. 30% of those were 70% were positive, 30% were negative, and there was about 30 queries, comments that were primarily based around, I didn't know where the query was at. And I think it's just sort of understandable. People might be comfortable with the information not being quite right or improvements there, but the biggest bang for bucks, absolutely, we believe, is on focusing on closing the loop around this.
Chris, I'm just going to check in. How many more slides have you to show us? Cool. You want to rattle those off? Would be great.
Yeah. All right. So I'll just run through the other 4. The improved communication and making sure that information was getting out into the community for those when changes were made, and staff. Reviewing the processes that are stepped through and expanding the voice of customers on an ongoing basis. The CST, for example, asking every customer if they were they prepared to do a survey. There's some broader areas there that are more systemic in terms of getting improvements made. Customer service excellence, giving resources, whether that's knowledge base, AI, more training to get better ability to answer, improving our systems around internal collaboration and communication, and leveraging technology at the heart of this, a single source of a customer, a CRM, so that there's a single source of truth and view of every customer's experience. And the 5th area there is just looking at identifying any of the barriers to high performance. And the future focus is just potentially around integrating, automating and aggregating, so that all of this is happening all of the time, and you get continuous feedback and measurement, which is fantastic for empowering teams to get the information, make the decisions, and then measure instantaneously the progress being made. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And Nicola, was there other things you wanted to add? Yeah.
Yes, really just what I want to do very briefly, Ms. Sam, is just speak to the report that I put in that just covers off a few areas in response to what Chris put forward. So in section 3.2 of my report, it just discusses the initiatives that are underway and planned which aim to improve the experience and satisfaction of customers. And those include work on the digital services and the strategy that Council have already approved, It notes that a customer relationship management system is pivotal, but of course this is going to take time to implement. So in the meantime, there are other actions that Council can take right now to improve the experience of customers, and the priorities that we've got are clear and prompt communication, addressing customer response times and access to self-service, training of staff and enhancing first impressions. We're also bedding down the online booking system in aquatics and fitness program areas, and developing a council-wide customer complaints policy that tells customers in very plain and practical language about what to do when things aren't going well, so that we can make sure we can address it. I think just important to note before I close that the executive leadership team have looked at these recommendations and responded to them by making a commitment to creating a more responsive, efficient and customer-centric council services, with the aim being to drive excellence. And so the key focus areas of ELT is resolving customer inquiries at that first point of contact as much as possible, making sure customers know what's going on with their service inquiries, so that's the closing the loop that Chris was talking about, setting and monitoring standards and frameworks, so driving our own performance, improving internal collaboration and communication, which will address that risk around handover, and also maintaining high quality levels of customer service, particularly at peak times and in challenging situations. So that's our combined conclusion to our presentation, and happy to hand over to you for questions.
Thank you. Chantal, there was nothing else you wanted to say? Cool. Well, thank you for the work that's been done to review where we're at. It's nice to have that outside independent look at where things are at, and this has been one of the KPIs that we've had for our Chief Executive, which is why been brought back to council today, so that we can have that view on it. So you appreciate that, Elizabeth.
Hi, thank you. That was really excellent to see. One of the things for me is that I don't see where councillors fit in this matrix, because I think that actually there are times when we're unaware of what's going on because the customer comes directly to council, and I think there's a place for us to be involved often. And sometimes we utilise, and that's fantastic, where somebody will send it back to a counsellor and say, go and touch base with your actual counsellor. And I think that really helps to establish closing that loop. I'd just like to know where you see us fitting in the Future Focus model, and how we could be more at use to this whole program.
Yes, well, there's just a range of options going forward. For example, Taupo District Council are using some of the aggregation of third-party information. We're working with a council in Sydney, Inner West, where they've got an advanced Tech 1 system, and basically every query that comes through gets an automated survey, and so you've got that continuous link. So it really just depends on the journey and time frame of investment. But as Nicola was saying, that there's a whole lot of stuff that can be done and is being planned to be done right here, right now, to increase the breadth and depth of consultation and involvement and feedback.
I think also, and what I'd add to that is it's been a learning opportunity for Chantal and I just about what we would do in future years around customer experience surveys, because actually they become really useful when they build up over time and you get to see some of that change. And one of the things that we would look to do for the next one is actually to include a survey for councillors as well. So we understand the perceptions of staff around customer experiences and satisfaction, but it would be useful to also draw on that councillor viewpoint of it as well. So we would expect that next year that will be part of the process.
Cool. Thank you. Sorry, as we said, microphone off, and we're moving on. Nicola. Nicole.
Yeah, Nicola's up there, not me. Thanks for this. And I still remember with Chantal coming to talk to us on how many, it was like 3,000 or something that was waiting to queries that were just sitting there, and managed to close off pretty much, well, all of them from my understanding. So we've come from quite a relatively low base, so it's good to see more improvements on what we're doing as well. Just a couple of questions. So, I mean, the thing about the staff reluctance to meet with walk-in customers, and I can understand that staff might, already busy doing something else, but are the people that come in offered an appointment or an opportunity that they can come and talk to them later as part of the process that we've got? Also, do you know at the moment how many sort of queries or whatever we've got waiting to be addressed at the moment? And the website review, the website has been something that's been talked about for some time, but do we have a date on when we're going to have something? Because that would solve a lot of, from the front end, just being able to find stuff on the website and have the queries, because there is a lot of stuff on our website, but it's actually trying to navigate where it is.
Absolutely. So so your first question, if somebody comes in and there's nobody available, we absolutely we'd send an email or a request to the department that they're asking for to get back to the customer to ensure that there is a opportunity for them to come in.
Yeah.
We do try all avenues though to get somebody out at that point so that somebody is seen then. In regards to the service request, we have, the last time I seen was 1,018, but just to give you concept, there was 1,682 requests done in May, and 78% of them were closed off and completed within that time frame. So we are getting really good at making sure we do that. It's just that closing the loop component so customers know where it's at when it's closed off. I'm not sure about the website.
I'll answer the bit about the website. It's part of the modern workplace initiative that's being driven out of the investment into digital upgrade. We've had to prioritise. When Matt comes back from his holiday, he will be doing a presentation to councillors just around the digital update and what's been prioritised to get the best bang for buck. And I think the website probably is a couple of years away.
I think it was year 2 or 3 was the last time we had an update from it.
Yeah, that's what I just was wondering about. But the good thing, it's good to hear Chantel has a real importance on closing the loop, because that was something that I know myself and Murray Lemon, this is how long ago it goes back, we're really concerned about with like Snap, Send, Solve and stuff like that. People could see that things have been, at times that things have been done that they'd requested, but not actually knowing, well, you know, whether it was finished or things like that. So, no, it's good to hear. Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam. Thank you very much, team. Really enjoyed the presentation and well done on driving up satisfaction of our customers and also working towards closing the loop. It was answered around closing the loop means finishing the job that's been asked for. So I presume that the person that was waiting 2 years, that one's been closed. Great. Yeah, Snap, Send, Solve. Is it still currently active and working well? Is it because I am still receiving requests about from locals in my area about not being able to close the loop on some of the things there. Then I just normally escalate that straight through to the boss, to the CEO there. So, and that's a lot less than what used to happen. So I congratulate you all on being very effective in those roles. The paper that's been put today is for information. So I'm guessing the direction of travel would be an increase in budget to drive up customer satisfaction through digital efforts and increasing that sort of thing. So is that the direction of travel that we think we'll be travelling towards, or is this covered currently in the
so it's within current budget and resourcing. So the reason for having the different stages of recommendations was what can we do with the here and the now within what we're doing already, and that's taken care of.
Thank you. And I do appreciate the question around councillors' roles as contractors, obviously, and I see that's captured in here. The councillors' role is obviously using this information, if we have it readily, then upholding the integrity and the mana of the organisation or not. Just the plain truth is often, I see an integral role of being a councillor. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. Do you want to just touch on that too, Sharon?
Yeah, thanks, Shane, about the question with regard to the budget. So we're starting to see the inroads from councillor and the community support around the long-term plan of the investment. over a 10-year period. To be fair, that is probably a starting point. By the time next council and get to the LTP, we will have a greater understanding of the levels of, what we may need for an ERP and other things. So, but I think we've started to make some good inroads with the investment that we've had to date.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Yep. Kia ora. This is really helpful information. The part that I've just got two parts to talk about. The first is really trying to understand from here what the roadmap to integrating all of the service improvements look like, and how will council continue to monitor the implementation of these recommendations. Because when I look at this, I just got a little bit confused on the last few slides as to really what the roadmap looks like, and then how often will the check-ins with us be to make sure we're tracking well.
I might get Denise to speak to that, because she is au fait with the ELT commitment, and I'll.
Just, I guess, in terms of the response that we put into the report is our attempt to say, and this is the direction of travel that we're going in, and we are focusing on the areas that came up as the areas of greatest need to improve our service. That's what we're going to be focusing on, and you can expect an update on that at least annually, and we will be specifically tracking those areas of improvement that we're focusing on, which is around closing the loop, quality of information, and trying to get as much information as possible at the first point of contact.
That's helpful, because if we're holding our CEO to account for it as a KPI, then we need to make sure we get good information on it.
I think what we're intending to do, and I forget the name of it, but short, snappy surveys is the name that goes with it, and I can't remember what the name is.
Deep dive focused surveys around looking at some of the areas which were highlighted. There is an opportunity through the platform that we have connections with to go quite deep and ask them to just tell us a little bit more about some of those areas, as well as the fact that we now have staff who have signalled and flagged areas and opportunities for improvement, and we're talking with all of the heads of departments about how to drive and all of council customer complaints policy that's supported by all of council customer complaints procedures. It's not that we don't have them, we just don't have one. Right. So there are individual procedures and individual processes around the place. We think that there's no need and by and large, we think we should be able to standardise a lot of that and have it as one process and policy across the organisation.
Sorry, the word I was looking for was we can do pulse surveys, which is short, snappy surveys to do a barometer check throughout the year with our community, and that's something we'll look at.
Great, thank you. My second question was about the staffing, and I'm really pleased that you provided that link, because I was thinking, how do I actually ask a question that's about customer satisfaction when ultimately what I'm trying to uncover is what is the culture of this entity, and is it healthy and is it well, and are our staff happy? And I was thinking, how do I actually explain why that's important? And you did it. You said happy staff equals happy and better experience. And so I'm pleased that you actually made that link, because for me, one of the questions that I had sitting here at the back of my head is, currently, how are we ensuring that the customer service expectations that we're expecting to be delivered, especially around those first contact resolutions and the follow-up, are achievable within the current staffing levels and the well-being support that we want to provide to our staff? So do we have the right mix of people to meet the expectation that we are setting for you to achieve?
Just obviously I've gone through every single comment in the process, and we deal with a lot of councils. The comments from the frontline staff were things around adjustments, not, oh my gosh, it's all too much. It was more around, hey, better sometimes resource allocation at peak times, better information, maybe some more training on some of the technology that's already there, improve systems between the groups. So they were very, very positive and constructive around doing more just with what's there, but just making those improvements that have been touched on by Denise and Nicola. So there was no overwhelming, it's all too much, it's too hard. No, and you can see if that was the case, you wouldn't be getting those 9 out of 10s and 9.3 out of 10s across the board. But the work that the SDC is doing by starting to look at that employee stuff is leading edge in this space, in this sector. It's reasonably common in some other sectors, but in terms of local government, really starting to lead the way by connecting those dots. So, yeah.
So you're saying your feedback is the data is showing you that this is not that the capacity, there is not a capacity issue here, and that's great to get that from a data perspective. I guess I would also like to hear that from the CEO perspective. Like, have we got the balance right, and can the expectations that we're setting be achievable in the capacity that we have on hand?
Yeah, thanks, Megan. I think it again just comes back to what has been spoken to. It is about the investment into our digital environment, and councillors have given us that support to start to enable that digital investment. It's about leadership and making sure we break down silos to get that integration. So it in terms of, it isn't necessarily about capacity, it's about making sure that we make those things better, that we've got the right technology, that we break down the barriers, and that it's well understood about roles and responsibilities. So I think in terms of our capacity, I think we're okay. Areas of growth and probably where the capacity issue may lie is when you get into the business, where we see that there is an area where that falls down. And I could imagine, we've got 2 pods where we know that due to the growth, we're seeing significant growth in terms of consents and other things coming through. If we have to look at capacity, it might be in those areas, but at the same time, we need to be looking at artificial intelligence, and we need to be having a look to see what AI can do to help support our staff, because if the preference would be is that we use technology that we've got to hand, or bring in new technology rather than necessarily always appointing new staff.
Right. Okay. So work smarter.
Yeah.
Great. No, that's a really good, fulsome answer. Thank you.
My experience has been is the team are doing a very good job in answering, as I said, a high percentage of questions. When they usually come to us as governors, usually something's gone wrong. And inevitably, usually what I've found, it's when we have to have some very difficult conversations and tell people, actually, what you're requesting, we're not going to do that, or it can't be done. How do you think we're faring in that space where we have the difficult conversations? Because that seems to be where the real rubber hits the road, around those. We want to be a customer-pleasing organisation, but a percentage, that 10% or whatever of those conversations are, actually, we hear your request, but we're not going to do it. How do we go in that space?
Again, in the free text question, the answers, and just general experience, the issue doesn't seem to be so much about the wrong, not getting the answer. It's around clarity around the why, or just about, again, closing the loop on it. It seems to be that the team do a really good job in having those difficult conversations. So I think the focus is on the process, why the decision's been made, how the decision and the process is going to be completed, and clarity around that.
Because I said so doesn't cut the mustard.
Does in my house, but only to me, not for me.
Sorry, Chantel, I thought it might be a good one for you. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to us and the report, and well done, Sharon, as too. Full team effort. Do we had a mover and seconder, I think, at the start of this, or do we just get straight into the report? No mover and seconder. So a mover and seconder for Lydia. Thank you, Nicole. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thank you. The next item is the local government remits for 2025. So we'll just move through those. These are part of this report is that Malcolm or Councillor McInnes in his absence be the voter at the AGM, as I'll be chairing the meeting, and then just some direction today in the conversation. I think also acknowledging that you want to leave room should there be amendments in the meeting, and other people, there will be speakers in the meeting, for those listening to be able to use their brains and what they've heard today from council direction with what might be amended to support that, rather than because something gets amended all of a sudden that null and voids your discussion today to vote for or against, or to support for or against these things at the AGM. So do you have a mover and seconder for discussion here, and then we'll go through and just go through each one and go to support, not support. Moved Shane, seconder Bob. Thank you. So the first one is the security payments. Do people want to support or not support that first paper? Supports. Yep. Anyone not support? No, generally support. Cool. Option 2, paper 2 is improving joint management agreements. This is proposed by the Northland Regional Council. Any views on whether we support or do not support this? Tab 11, it's on page 535 of today's agenda. The joint management agreements tend to involve regional councils a little bit more than they have the TA, so it won't necessarily directly involve us, but I think it's worth supporting the intent that's here. Anyone got a different view? Support? This is on page 535. Sorry. 523, yep. We've got alcohol licensing fees, again proposed by Northland, but this is the Far North District Council. Support, yep, cool. Number 4 is aligning public and school bus services, which is what we talked about before. Lydia?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted a little bit clarity around this, because for looking at it from Nelson's view, it makes sense for them probably. But if I look at it from, say, Canterbury's view, I don't know. And I actually spoke to a couple of ECAN councillors this morning about this, just to gauge their thoughts on it, and how a regional council would actually deliver that. It might make sense in the urban environments, but I guess I just want a little bit more clarity around how that would work in the rural environments. So at the moment, obviously this is something I've put a bit of thought into previously, like the Melbourne schools get a sum of money and they deliver for their community. If that was to go to regional council, that would look at regional council delivering that for the community, and I don't know whether that would actually give more economies than the schools delivering it themselves. So I support this in an urban environment. I'm unsure of how this would work in a rural, that's all. And looking at Canterbury as a whole, it's yeah.
So maybe we
I
would
can't
like
see that working at Canterbury as a whole. It's a lot of work for those guys to have to do. So you'd be clipping the ticket a little bit more for the work that would have to happen from them.
So at the moment, it says that public transport authorities, which is the regional and unitary authorities, could be looked at. But what we're wanting is maybe, because it says option of them, we're saying an option might be that it continues as it is, or an option might be a TA might look at working on that too. So we don't want to exclude ourselves. We want options.
Yes. Yeah, I fully support options in this, and I think that, I think point D in there is the most important one to me, is that it is outdated and inflexible rules. And so I support any type of review that is happening, just noting that the delivery arm of that might have implications.
Okay. Thanks, Lydia. Other thoughts? Who's next? Nicole.
Yeah, I looked at this. I can see this, the sense in it, and I think some of this was already going on. I think with buses that we've already got, like with Burnham, I think they bring the kids for the Rolleston College. But I'm, like Lydia saying, I mean, looking for from an urban perspective, and but I think it's worth looking at, even just to raise it as a, whether ECANs come back and say it doesn't work, but at least it's something that looking at, because it is good if there can be some changes that are more making the thing more efficient than what it maybe is at the moment. It doesn't hurt, I would have thought.
Yeah, cool. Grant.
I don't support this. School bus services are absolutely critical to rural schools. What Nelson's doing is taking an approach where they think by putting the school bus funding into the urban bus services, they'll get a better public bus service, which may work for them. But in our instance, and Malcolm will back me up, where there's a public bus service like Prebbleton, the kids have to get on and pay to go to Lincoln High School. And so you're not going to get more bang for buck. But in rural schools, it's such a lifesaver for rural communities to have a well-functioning bus service, and having it being delivered by a public revenue required service just wouldn't work to get the kids to school. I spend a lot of time working on school buses in my role on the Board of Trustees, and I would be very, very loath to let ECAN take it over.
Thanks, Grant. Any other views?
Grant's already said it.
So we've got some difference of views around the table. We're going to end up needing to either support this, wanting to amend it, or oppose it. Is there anyone that thinks there's some amendment that could be required? No, we'll just show of hands then. Those that support what's proposed, raise your hands. Those that are opposed to what's there? Okay, we're going to vote against it. That's cool. And number 5 is a review of local government arrangements to achieve better balance. This is worth LGNZ leading. We need to make this happen. Tauranga has put it forward as a part of us discussing our own futures rather than government telling us what our futures are. Anyone think differently? No. Cool. Malcolm, you've got we're supporting all of them, Malcolm, except for the school bus one. Yep. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thank you. And we will break for 20 minutes, and we'll come back at 3:15 during the meeting. paper on our agenda is the future use of the Ellesmere Reserves Board Reserve. This was a matter that was discussed on the 21st of May and has been left then to lie on the table until today's further discussion. So I'll hand over to the team. Claire, thank you.
Kia ora koutou. As Ms Sam just said, this is an update to the information that's clearly shown in green in the report, so you'll be able to see that new information in green. The map, which is on page 3, was provided as the most useful map to inform the discussion by Mark Rikers, and that map refers to the ring fencing consideration, and there are a couple of examples included in the report as well in green.
Great. Thank you for that. Any discussion and comments that people have got to make? We don't need to go over all the ground that was covered during the last meeting, but if there's still some brief comments around that you want to make sure they're front of mind as we make decisions today, you're welcome to. And then anything new you'd like to add as well. Elizabeth.
Hi, thank you. I would like to seek some clarification. So around the proposal, which is council's going to choose now, if, the way the money is spent on our reserves in Ellesmere. Is there no capacity for the community to determine? So you feel that that's a better result than the community determining how to spend that money on the Ellesmere reserves?
Look, I think if we look at how we approach income that comes in from reserves across the district and how that's then reallocated back into invest into those reserves, it would be unusual to allow the community to make an assessment as to what does and doesn't fit within the scope of the purpose for which those funds are received and are meant to be directed.
Thank you. Deborah.
I'm going to move this recommendation that's with regards to the maps. The reason being, I appreciate the time that the staff actually put in researching this, especially through, I understand, Mr. Rikers, who has been here for a long time and associated with council. It has gone back through to the maps that this was the original area that was actually always considered under the Ellesmere Reserve Fund, and it's the closest map that can possibly be found around pre-1989. So I appreciate all the research. I appreciate the input from, as I said, Mr. Rikers in managing to research this, and I'm more than happy to move it.
Thanks, Deborah, and seconded by Shane. Anything further you want to add, Deborah?
No.
Cool. Grant.
I just really want to understand what is the why that it will be restricted to Ellesmere. When I read the document, it said that Mr. Gamble left the land as a reserve. It appeared that there was no immediate need for it to be used as a reserve, and it was then leased out, and the income was then used within Ellesmere. When I think of other reserves, as you said earlier, like Horata and those sort of things, you generate income, it just goes into the pot and it gets spent over all of Selwyn. Did you find somewhere a why it must be, because it doesn't, otherwise we're treating it differently from every other reserve?
Yeah, look, I think the Reserves Act doesn't prevent sort of reasonable ring fencing, in my view. What we've got here is land that was specifically gifted and designated at the time to be sort of overseen by the Ellesmere Reserve Domain Board, which were designated as trustees at the time. And my understanding is that the feedback from the group, the community funding group that then oversaw this, that there should be a recognition of the fact that this was land gifted to that community, and therefore making sure that the funds that are generated and income generated from that land is specifically reinvested back into that community.
Let me use another example. Mr. Rhodes gifted Rhodes Park to the community. The Taitapu Golf Club leases part of that land. That money doesn't go back into the Taitapu community, it goes into the wider Selwyn community. Again, I can't, I'm just trying to understand why is that different. It appears that we're using a historical, that the land was gifted as a reserve, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and it wasn't needed as a reserve, so it's leased out. The income has then been decided by a group of trustees to be spent within the local area, which seems a sensible thing of the day, but it doesn't seem to apply now, does it?
So we've pulled a map in and an option for ring fencing on the basis of requests for some guidance and direction on that at last council meeting.
Yeah, I suppose what I'm seeking is, did you find anywhere a directive from Mr. Gamble or a deed anywhere saying that the funds must be retained for use within Ellesmere?
No, we did not.
Lydia.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear that, because I thought in the last report that I had seen that it was in the deed to say that the funds were to be used in Ellesmere, but actually it just turns out that the Reserve Board had the funds to spend in their reserve. So this is complicating this yet again. But I just wanted to clarify, Deborah, when you said you moving the report and the ring fencing, I wanted to understand what option of the ring fencing it was that you were supporting. I'll have to.
My apologies, I'm still loading Diligent. The area that is actually on the map that's included, and that is Dunsandel, south of the State Highway, bordering up to the boundary of Waikirikiri, and then going around Lake Tiwahura, and then going down and using the Rakaia as the boundary. Traditionally, that was what happened years ago. Was when we had community committees, a lot of them were incorporated societies, and they had natural boundaries to meet the Incorporated Societies Act, which required a boundary for membership. Traditionally, that was the boundary which was always recognised as the Ellesmere Reserve boundary. Now you've probably got, even in the Melbourne area, you've got reserve boundary areas. You've had funding through various pots of money that have been bequeathed or left. The Westview Fund, I think you had, that was only spent within the Melbourne community area. Was it called the Westview? What was it called? Yeah, the Westview, only Darfield. I've just been, so I stand to be corrected. That money just got spent in Ellesmere, no, in Darfield. This is a situation where we have an income from a trust deed, if I'm corrected, that should be spent, in my mind, in that particular Ellesmere area, because it's subject to a trust deed historically, and it's income that's still coming in. Now, Councillor Miller has actually mentioned about roads, the bequeath from roads. So we have a situation there where we obviously have the golf course that brings in funding, that goes into the pot. Now, without understanding whether there was a trust deed with regards to that particular income, I think it's fair that that should be looked at as well. The reason why I'm differentiating this from others is because historically it is through a trust deed that the income was bequeathed to us. We also have the Gammick Estate, which is a similar trust deed that has to go through to the libraries of Christchurch, and that's quite clear in that trust deed what the funds are for, and it's from leased farmland. So we do have traditionally these pots of funds coming in, And the thing that I differentiate is the fact that if they are subject historically to a trust deed, then you actually probably have to go back and look originally what the terms of those trust deeds were when nearest to it of what that fund was actually used for.
So let's just get some clarity on whether or not that actually exists or whether that's something that we've made up, because it sounds like from what you've just shared with us, let's get the legal perspective on what is actually there and what's not there.
So look, we are taking back almost 100 years of history, so appreciate there are some complexities here that need sort of unwinding. There was a will which gifted some land to the Crown and designated that that land would be recreational reserve, and initially trustees caring for the land would be the Domain Board as specified. There was no direction there as to how any income generated should be allocated or designated, and over time there appears to have been a convention that this money was given back to various community groups for various purposes. Where we have got to as an option and having looked at this clean 100 odd years on, the trust as it existed must have been extinguished at law if there ever was one. We haven't been able to identify a trust deed that gives any clearer guidance or direction as to how funds should have been spent. The law requires that trust to have been extinguished and assets distributed by now. We are now the responsible authority looking after that land. It remains sitting with the Crown, but SDC has that responsibility. Given there is no trust deed or historical direction as to how the money should be spent, we have taken it back to first principles. That provides under the Reserves Act, which is the only governing direction that we have clearly identified here as to spending the money, that fund, any income generated from that land should be put back into the purposes for which the Reserves Act applies.
And I mean, this seems like it should have been dealt with in 1989 when councils came together. And we're either going to deal with this as a one-off quite separate to the other way that we do things normally, or we treat it the same as Hororata, we treat it the same as Taitapu, we treat it the same as those places where income generated because the amount of land given was way too big for the current reserve provision, and who knows what will happen in the future, but the income from the farming operation in Hororata doesn't stay within the Hororata domain. That's the nub of today's conversation. So either we're going to, it doesn't sound like we're talking about anything else other than that. It's either we keep that, that's point number one, then we approve that the Ellesmere Reserve Board and any income is for the maintenance and upgrading of Ellesmere reserves, or it's Selwyn reserves. And it'll be interested in, we've had two views now, one from Deborah and one from Grant around the differences that sit there. Lydia's shared some things. So where do people sit on that one piece? Because it seems like it's a point of contention. Malcolm chaired this meeting last time when this was discussed, but the addition is a map to provide some clarity. Now that we've got that clarity, is that actually the intended outcome? Because just because it's in the report doesn't mean it's the direction we have to take, but it does now mean we can make a really clear decision of ring-fenced for Ellesmere, or like every other reserve income in the district, it's there for the benefit of still reserves, but across the district. Shane?
Yeah, I guess just firstly acknowledging the chair of the committee that brought it first to council, and thank you very much, Bob, for doing that, because obviously there's further conversation to be had. I'm just disappointed it's taken to get to this point with the amount of information that we've had to find a potential oversight or underside or wherever it might be to then make a decision on the fly. If what you're saying is that a will and testament has no legal standing on the distribution of those funds and that there may have not even existed a trust deed, I think that was important clarification from the start. I've been calling it a trust deed, and I think we've heard that mentioned a number of times, but actually it was a will and testament, and also acknowledging the wishes that Mr. Gamble wanted. He wanted a rock in his name, and I want to acknowledge the Reserve Board that upheld those wishes, and Stu Brannigan and those guys that actually went down there and made the time to do that and keep everything operating. But in the context of being a councillor and a governor, it's about doing what's right, and if it's the only one that sits out of our current way of doing business and our current way of managing reserves, then the right thing would be to look at it across the district, as Grant has mentioned, and distribute it across the district. However, making a decision right now, the affected parties wouldn't be very impressed about that, I guess. The ones that do receive the funding at the moment, what is the process for them? It seems all very on the fly for quite a major, what could be a major difficult decision for some of the Ellesmere reserves or the reserves that benefit from this to hear all of a sudden. So potentially there's more work to do, unfortunately, but I think the right thing to do is to re-look at this from obviously a legal standpoint, to say actually a will and testament isn't a legal binding contract, or is it? And then what is the right way to distribute these funds from a district? Because it is an outlier at the moment. So is it going to lay on the table, guys? Again?
Yeah, well,
No, I think Malcolm was before me.
This is an anachronism. When I first got elected in 1992, it was the second term of this council, and the parochialism ran high between the Paparoa council area, the Melbourne council area, the Ellesmere council area, as to having been put together. And there was a lot of, you didn't pay for this, I've paid for that. There was a hell of a lot of argument, and some of it has still existed, unfortunately, in the background. There were many little reserve funds like this. There was one at Springston. And about 10 or 15 years ago, this council moved to use it or lose it with a lot of those little reserve funds. And we had to disperse them into the community to do whatever. This fund had always sat there, and it sat on the down low. I've always referred to it as the slushy fund for Ellesmere, which won't impress Ellesmere voters. But it sat on the down low, and where the money was used was a dark and deep secret, I think, within the area. And I agree with Shane. This needs to be a level playing field across everything. We've levelled up. We tried to level up all the leftover little bits of funding 10 or 15 years ago and use them in the communities they were intended for and for the purposes they were intended for. How long do we carry on having this particular fund targeted to Ellesmere only, which is, quite frankly, it's not fair on the rest of the community? As Grant has pointed out about the roads estate, we also have the Hororata Reserve as well. So perhaps it is time, councillors, to remove Ellesmere reserves from item 1 of the resolution in front of us and replace that with Selwyn reserves. And to test the meeting, I will move an amendment that happens.
So what's, just for clarity, Malcolm, your amendment?
I'm going to remove the word Ellesmere from resolution 1 and replace it with Selwyn.
Is there a seconder for that change? Is it under number 1? You're saying the word Ellesmere and the fourth to last word will be deleted and replaced with the word Selwyn as the amendment.
That is my intent.
Seconded, Bob. Yeah, there is a seconder for that. Okay.
Bob.
So let's just discuss. So now we're focused on that as the key change. We can come back to voting and discussion on the whole resolution. But let's just focus on that Selwyn versus Ellesmere. And it means those that have spoken before are able to speak again to this matter. Nicole.
So what I was going to say is, from hearing from Grant and Lydia with the Hororata, is that I have now got a different view, and I would actually go with what's been changed and what's been suggested by Malcolm in regards to that. I mean, we shouldn't be singling things out if we haven't been doing for the other things. And I was obviously not clear on how this actually sat with regards to other things. I was not aware until Grant said about Rhodes Park and such like, and we should be treating everything the same.
Thanks, Nicole. Before I get to the next speaker, can I just check, all these reserves have reserve management plans. Whether a reserve is in Ellesmere or outside of Ellesmere, it's funded through the reserve rate that the whole district pays for to cover all of the things that are important in all of the reserves, regardless of whether this exists. So can you just tell me what is this fund used for? Does it subsidise the reserve rate in those reserves, or is this just for extra things on top of what has otherwise been identified in the reserve management plans?
Are you, if the question is around what has this fund been traditionally used for, my understanding, and I'm looking to Claire for guidance, but it would be fair to say that it was certainly in terms of the community services and facilities groups awareness, we only became aware that this fund existed 4 years ago, and up until that point there had been, for a period of significant years, a couple of groups that benefited from that, and they there were 2 specific groups, and that's what it was spent on. So that's where we got involved in terms of incorporating it into a more contestable fund, but it has not been treated in any way consistently with others. It has been treated as a particular fund that has been accessed by 2 groups in the main.
And so the intent of today, and even the change from Ellesmere to Selwyn or keeping it in Ellesmere, is that it would still be a contestable fund, or it's just going to be, so it is lost as it sits from its current use, from current users' expectations, it will change regardless of Ellesmere or Selwyn. Yep, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm not supportive of changing it now, because of the groups that are in receiving of it, and in my opinion, it was used to subsidise the rate for the management of those reserves. It was used for the cricket grounds, cricket nets, the golf club, upgrades of sprinklers, I think. And when I came on board in 2019, at that time it was use it or lose it. And at that point, the board members came together to look at the various projects of where it was to be spent, where it was best spent. And that was the rugby grounds, the golf club, the motorsport, the speedway, and there might have been another couple in there, but it was certainly used to subsidise what expenditure that the district would have to pick up. So in moving that, you might gain a 70 a year or whatever it is, the income that's coming in, but potentially the costs will be more. So I'm unsupportive of it moving that at the moment. I support the direction of travel, but I would like the receivers of that fund to be included in the conversations moving forward, that this is the direction of council and that it has my support. Thank you.
Oh, kia ora. Not a mana whenua issue, so but I can't help myself because I was a trust lawyer. And so, like, I look at the legal advice and I can see the trust was created when the will was created, right? And the fact that it doesn't have terms doesn't mean, or it doesn't have a deed, is really common. In fact, I very rarely have ever seen a will that's accompanied by a trust deed. So it's a testamentary trust, and you've made it really clear what the conditions of that trust are. It's been somehow perpetuated to be something else, and it's, from my perspective, time to stop that and just treat it like it should just be part of community funding, like all other community funding. There's no legal basis to treat it any differently. And I think that brings equity to the process. And then the only other part would be, whenever you're getting legal advice, you're really mitigating your risk. You're really sitting down and going, well, what's the risk here of if we do A or B? And given that there is no legal evidence of anything outside of that will, then I can't see where our legal risk is. So it's more about doing the right thing. And we've decided as a council that the right thing to do is to amalgamate community funding and not treat anyone differently. So that's my perspective on it.
In complete difference to what Megan's just stated. I feel that our communities, by and large, particularly the reserve boards, have really found that they've had their legs cut off. Our communities are crying out to have some ability to make decisions in their communities, and we've taken that away over the last number of years. And this is just the final piece, really, in which we centralise all the money, the pools of the funds, and all the decision making. And I think we need to actually return back and go the other way. And we need to give the communities back some opportunities to make decisions for their areas and give them the ability to select what is important. And Shane mentioned before how the spending was able, the previous years, that money was able to be spent on things that was needed in the community instead of having to put it back onto us, going through the community grants and an accept or decline process. It's a shame that we're here at this point. So I don't accept the proposal. I don't accept either Selwyn or Ellesmere, because I believe that the community should retain the ability to make some decisions locally.
Last time this was at council, I asked for it to lie on the table for more information. It's great to see more information, but it was my understanding that it was in a trustee to be spent in Ellesmere. So this becomes a little bit more alarming to have this information that is not the case. I did ask at the last meeting to have comms with the Ellesmere community, and so I don't know whether or not that has happened. Has there been any discussion with the Ellesmere community on that? Because we had, at the last meeting, ward councillors had different views on that, and so I was kind of keen to hear from the community and what their thoughts were. The second part to that is, if we said yes to ring fencing that into Ellesmere, we are setting a precedent for other communities to come to us, and for the likes of Hororata are going to turn up and say, well, that's great, we expect the same. The communities of Taitapu are going to say the same. And yeah, it's in quite a difficult space now with this more information brought to us.
So I just wonder, we've had some good discussion here, and there's been new information in the paper, but it also feels like there's been new information landed in the meeting. If I was on the receiving end of these funds and sitting in the community thinking this is how it's been done, for the council to all of a sudden somewhere over in Rolleston make a decision separate from talking to me about the outcomes, I think this would be quite an offensive move. So I just wonder whether I'm not sure what the rush is to do it today again. I thank you for bringing it back, but I just wonder whether we let some conversation happen locally, let the transition and the change be talked about, and then there might be a general direction, and staff have heard the conversation today. I'm wondering what we need to land today to give you the certainty to have that conversation. But as soon as we say, if Malcolm's amendment passes, that it's Selwyn, that does really set the direction from here. So I'd be keen to understand what decision we make, or how a decision today affects what you're going to need to talk to the community and receiving entities currently about, and thinking about Shane and Elizabeth too. This is bringing it in line with everyone else, so there's a fairness aspect to it, but it feels like, it almost feels punitive on the people that are the last ones to have this transition happen, because we're singling them out now, whereas if it was done as a part of 7 other reserves at the time, it wouldn't feel quite the same.
If I can just speak to that, and then I'll ask Nicola to speak to that as well, and Don may have a view. We came across the fund, and it was the intent to wrap it into the community funding grants program at that time, because that was one of the funds that were being called upon to be centralised, and it was fair to say that there hadn't been sufficient legal investigation at that time, and so there were some caveats around our confidence in what was being proposed, and so it was incorporated with some, in my view, caveats. But there was some nervousness, because I hear what Councillor Epeha has talked about, but I think for the last number of years there have actually only have primarily been 2 recipients of that fund, and they benefited quite substantially from that fund, and have the beneficiaries have been members of that particular group. And so there was some concern, I guess, from the staff that we were starting to breathe life into a fund and encourage the utilisation of it, for it to potentially be, as we are at this point now, when we understand what the actual legal position is, that we take it away. So we have been a bit nervous about the process going forward, because absolutely, we would imagine that if it becomes, as we promote it, it will be more and more used by Ellesmere community. We have no doubt that would be the case, and yet it was a dying fund in a sense, that it wasn't well known, it wasn't well managed, and there had only been two recipients of it. But is that correct, Nicola, in terms of your investigation into it? And
I think what's useful to understand at this particular point was that the fund sat with the Reserves Board right up until it disbanded, which was around 2021. And what they used to do was they used to go out each year and visit the reserves and determine what the money was spent on. And a significant portion of it went to the golf club and the motor racing club. And it wasn't probably for things that ratepayers would have picked up on if it wasn't funded by council. So we're talking about things like sanding the golf club and the bunkers and things like that. It was used to do things like purchase a container for the motor racing club to put some of their equipment in and things like that. So they wouldn't be costs that you'd expect ratepayers to be picking up if it wasn't. And then there was also funds spent on some of the reserves by council on particular projects that community had indicated an interest in. So that's things like your cricket nets or the rebound wall and for tennis and things like that. And so those were about improvements to reserves that brought a wider benefit to community members rather than to the members of a particular club. So the upgrades to the golf club and the motor racing club typically benefited the members of those clubs, not the community at large. When the community funding policy was being looked at in its entirety, this fund became something that we became aware of. We hadn't been aware it existed until we were quite a way through that particular policy. We sought legal advice, but at that point council didn't have an in-house legal team, and we weren't able to get the legal advice we needed in time for that policy. What we came to realise is that the beneficiaries of it, we wouldn't have brought it or proposed that it be brought into the contestable community funding round if we had have known what we now know in terms of the legal opinion around it. So far there's only been one contestable funding around. The council had approved a portion of the income to be put through that contestable funding round, and the two major recipients in prior years, that being the golf club and the motor racing club, did actually only get 5,000 out of it in that contestable funding round. So their dependence on it as an income source, I would say, has decreased significantly, and the expectations around that. So all of the other recipients of that contestable funding in the first and most recent round were organisations that had never received funding from this. So there's not a great deal of reliance or expectation around that fund by community groups at this particular point in time. So given that the legal advice points to the fact that it can be used for any reserve in Selwyn under the Reserves Act, which is what's in that very last part of it, the restriction, then there is an opportunity to do things differently and to do things district-wide. And I think the most important thing is if we had have understood at the time the community funding policy was put together, we would never have proposed it was used as a contestable funding round, but that seemed the most appropriate thing to do given the information we had at hand at that particular point in time.
Great. Thank you both. That's really helpful. Lydia.
I just left my light on because I was wondering about the question of have we had any engagement with the Ellesmere community, because I had contact with a couple of people over there that were ex-Reserve Board members, and their belief was that it was in trust to be spent in Ellesmere. So
I can.
sitting with
I am
contradictory
aware
information.
I am aware that correspondence has gone to those that have been traditionally the beneficiaries of that, and so primarily the motorcycling club and the golf club, and clearly signalled that the funding was under review and that we were looking at a different model. So we haven't gone to the latest round of recipients. Because that was, as Nicola said, was the first and only time that it's been gone. But we have certainly had communication with the two historic recipients of that fund.
Okay, yeah. At the last time this was here, my sort of thought was that potentially there would have been comms with the people that were the ex-members of the Reserve Board that have a lot of history and knowledge around this as well, to clarify that, because those members are still in that community.
They did provide quite a bit of the information. There was communication as part of that the original research that Nicola was undertaking. So there had been quite a bit of engagement with them around that. It wasn't specifically the question that you asked about we didn't ask them what they think it should be spent on.
The critical piece of information, I think, within this report is the fact that Mr Gamble gifted it as a reserve. If on the day it had been converted into playing fields and cricket nets and maybe made into a reserve, that reserve wouldn't be generating income. It would be a cost centre, and the whole of Selwyn would be paying for it to operate. And so if you put it the other way around, if the Gamble estate was turned into reserve, like it might be possibly in the future, would we be funding that reserve by target rating the Ellesmere Reserve area? We wouldn't be. And so I'm happy to see it lie on the table, because I think it's absolutely critical that we do understand that there is no trust or no agreement anywhere saying that Mr Gamble intended this land to be leased out and the proceeds used to maintain Ellesmere reserves, because it appears to me the people of the day, in good faith, have said we're not using this as a reserve, but we're going to generate income, we're going to use it on the other reserves, that's quite a straightforward thing to assume that they would have done, and that's just practical. But if there is no specific document saying that's how it should be used, I think it's got to fold into the current modus operandi. Like, when I think of Taitapu, the golf course rent used to come into the Taitapu, the Roads Park Reserve Board. It was used within the reserve to mow the grass, do all the stuff. They were quite aggrieved when the council dismantled the community committee that ran the Roads Park Reserve, but that was the decision. All reserves are in. It's district-wide rating. So this is an outlier. But I don't want this to happen, as Sam says, until we're absolutely certain that, and there are some community members who have been long-time board members who might be able to find a minute or something within the minutes that suggests this is true, but it doesn't seem so at the moment.
So if I can just clarify, the land did transfer to the Crown and it is designated as recreational reserve. So we hold that, and we are the administering body under the Reserves Act for these two pieces of land that were gifted under that estate. We have sought clarification from former members of the various governing bodies that were responsible over the period. There have been references in their documentation to a trust deed. There has never been anyone able to produce a trust deed for us, to our knowledge.
I guess.
Okay, we're coming to the end of this piece, because I think everyone's had their chance to have a say on it. Malcolm, you get a right of reply after Shane.
I guess then, reserve, are you able to use a reserve as farmland? Yep. And then there was maintenance costs as well for fencing and that type of thing out of the income generated, I believe. Mm-hmm. So that's just my question, really.
So under the Reserves Act, if you're not using the land for the purposes of which you need, you are able to grant licence and leases and generate income. And then the Reserves Act requires you to put that income back into the purpose for which it was generated and the purpose under the Act.
Thank you.
And there's no benefit in us giving you another 6 weeks to find out more information that you don't currently have. Like, you're giving us confidence that the searches have taken place to try and find anything that might have given us better direction than we've got today.
I'm comfortable.
No reason to delay.
I'm comfortable. There's no reason from anyone at this table to suggest that there was anything else.
Okay. So we've got the amendment up there that it moved from Ellesmere to Selwyn. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? We'll just have to raise our hands because there wasn't enough people saying yes or no there. So all those in favour that it move from Ellesmere to Selwyn, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those against with 3, I think. 1, 2, 3. Yep. Okay, so declare it carried. It's now the Selwyn Reserve. And we now have the entirety of the rest of the recommendations that are in front of us, 1, 2, 3 and 4. Is there any further comment or question people have on those 4 before we move the whole thing? Grant?
I still feel very uncomfortable that there's not one last chance for those people to find. I'd be happier. I mean, I'm happy with the direction we're heading, but I also have a degree of nervousness that there may be someone out in the community who has a minute or a notation somewhere for the sake of waiting a month and giving them the opportunity to provide that to us. Again, it's up to your worship how you proceed, but it does create a degree of nervousness on my behalf.
Thanks, Grant. Just procedurally, before we get a second for it to lay on the table, can we just, the direction I guess that we've now given you as a meeting is that it's going to, the intention is to use it for Selwyn unless there's this piece of information that we've heard about but never seen or cited. Is that enough direction for you, Nicola, if we were to give you another meeting cycle?
It would. I'm not. I've had a number of pieces of correspondence with Stu Brannigan, who was chairing the Ellesmere Reserve Board Reserve, when asking for deeds, trust deeds, it's only ever been photo clips of the will, and then we've independently searched for trust deeds, and there have been no trust deeds. And then other members of that board, there have also been no trust deeds produced. So I'm really not sure what further you can do in terms of finding a trust deed when those most intimately involved in the distribution of those funds haven't been able to produce one already. So I guess I would just, there's no problem with it, but it's just, I'm not sure what you'd do that's going to produce a result that's any different to what we've already got.
Okay.
Yeah.
Grant, are you formally asking for it to lay on the table?
Can I just...
Given the explanation that I've just heard, there doesn't appear to be any benefit for it to lie on the table that people have already been asked.
Yeah.
Okay, can I just...
Deborah?
Can I just highlight one particular issue? Historically, it is my understanding that there was a major fire in Ellesmere. And during that time, the council lost an awful lot of records, building records, every other kind of records. So I'm just really highlighting, right, that when you have a fire, and I guess it's a question, if we have a fire and we lose records, and you can check the dates because you'll find that down at the building department with regards to property limbs, there is a lot of files that are totally incomplete due to them being destroyed in a fire. And I'm just wondering historically, right, whether any documents that we had could have been destroyed, and that's why I'm sort of on Grant's camp with regards to the fact that someone may have some minutes that they've kept outside council with regards to the reserve minutes, and I personally think that, you know, it's worth one more check. But legally, where do we stand as a council, right?
We'll get an answer on that, Deborah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I just reiterate the comment that I made earlier that the law around perpetuity means that even if there was a trust deed, even if there was a trust, that will have expired by now, essentially, is the kind of end result there. So unless there is evidence that that was resettled into another trust, and there is certainly nothing to suggest that that's what's happened here, I remain confident in the position that the trust has extinguished. Council now has responsibility under the Reserves Act, and the fund should be applied consistently with that legislation.
Thank you. Yeah, after Malcolm.
We have heard that the two organisations that were benefiting from the subsidy from this reserve account are surviving without the subsidy from this reserve account. We've also heard that it's a question of equity across the whole of Selwyn in what we're doing here. Whether we will also hear that there's talk amongst others of the fact that there was a trust deed. Well, quite obviously there's no evidence of a trust deed, and talk is what it is talk. I think we need to move on past this resolution and get on with life, because we're talking about equity for everybody in Selwyn.
Thanks, Malcolm. And Megan.
And sorry, I know you say no second bite of the cherry, but we're really talking about a legal issue here, and I thought it might be really helpful to put the trust aside. We're making a public decision, which means judicial review applies, right? So that's the law that currently is applying to the decision that we're making right now. And are we making the decision in good faith based on good information? And are we following all of the good principles of judicial review? And so that if we were challenged, then really have we done everything we can to fall within the bounds of our decision making legally?
I am comfortable that we have.
Okay. All those in favour of the resolution that's now in front of us, say aye. Aye. Those against, declare it carried. Thank you. Thank you, team, for bringing that report to us. We now have the amendment to the designation for state highways, for State Highway 1, sorry.
Well, kia ora, everyone. Kia ora. This is a notice of requirement to amend State Highway 1 to increase or change the boundaries to State Highway 1 at Duns Crossing Road and Walkers Road to facilitate the construction of a roundabout by New Zealand Transport Agency. It has been through the statutory process. It was limited notified by council in March until April. There were two parties that were limited notified. Council did not receive any submissions. It went to a commissioner. The commissioner agreed with the processing planner with the conditions that they included, and therefore it is now before council to decide on whether they agree with the recommendation of the commissioner, and therefore we then recommend to the requiring authority whether to adopt the notice requirements and the conditions listed in Appendix 1.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a mover and seconder? Thank you. Grant and Malcolm. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item is tab 14, the trustee and director policy. Move Shane, seconded. Malcolm, will you second it? Yep. Great. Julie, Steve.
Hi, thanks for having us both here today and to bring this policy back for decision. I won't run through everything in detail because we had a good briefing on it, but what I'll run through is the changes. So what we've done is we've included both a clean copy and a tracked copy in the document. Where there were a couple of points where we didn't follow the exact feedback, so I've left the comments in there for transparency so we could see the thought process in there. So hopefully that has helped. So the few changes that you will see through this today, so following councillor direction, we have removed the Chief Executive as a standing member on the appointments panel. The Chief Executive will be there in a support function convening the panel for each appointment and remuneration only, but will not be a voting member of the panel. As was requested, we've pulled through some stronger references to diversity requirements for councillor organisations in terms of their skill matrix to be recorded. We've provided greater clarity that the appointments panel will be pulled together and composed differently for each appointment and process. And in terms of, because there was a bit of a split view on around about the stand down period, what we've tried to do is accommodate all the feedback we heard and clarify under the conflicts of interest provision that the type of conflict that might be considered would be if a potential appointee had served on a council or another council organisation, that is something to be taken into account by the appointments panel at the time of appointment and considered in context as to whether or not that conflict can be managed, and that way a decision can be made in context at the time rather than having a fixed rule. A requirement for the exit interview has been inserted as requested. The only change that we didn't fully embed is the ability for a board member to contest their removal. The reason for that is the ultimate power of a shareholder exists in their ability to dismiss a board at will if the worst happens. But what we've tried to do to acknowledge the intent, I think, of what was requested is look at the process of how we get there and make sure that people are given adequate feedback, adequate opportunities, and that we are engaging with our chairs and our boards if we are seeing issues before we get to the point of dismissal. And then I think the last probably comment I'd like to make is around this policy is this is our standard approach and it is our policy. We've retained the provisions within this policy that allow, if there are circumstances that justify for council to make a decision as a group to deviate from this policy at the time. So these are our standard rules of play. Council retains the ability to choose to do something differently if context requires. Is there anything else you'd like to add? No, we'll leave that with you and happy to take comments. And
Thank you.
questions.
Lydia.
I think this is great. I think you've wrapped in lots of different views into this policy. I support the review of this. The conflict of interest thing was a bit of a heated subject last time, and I just wanted to bring up the discussion around that. And I appreciate the wording that you've put in there. It leaves it open for the panel to see how that can be managed. I support the membership appointment panel to allow for specific skills that sit around this table to be involved in what director or trustee you might be appointing. And also, I support the part in here about remuneration and there being an element of public service into that. So, it's good to me. Thank you.
Nicole.
Yeah, I agree with what Lydia's said about it. It's been well done and taken our feedback on board. And I also particularly like, this was a question that was in my head, is the whole thing around diversity. And you've explicitly said, given examples of what we're actually talking about. And I think that's very good too. So it is understood what we're meaning by that. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Megan.
Well, no surprises, I'm going to support what my colleagues have said. I think it's really challenging when you're faced with conflicting or not a collective view about how you actually take that away and come back with something that's going to satisfy all parties. And so for you to be able to do that, really stands in testament to your really good work. So well done with that. And I think this really does strike a sensible balance of, in those differing views. And I also wanted to specifically comment on how you've threaded in diversity and how important it is to thread that into a policy as well. And it's a policy, and policies aren't rules, but this is a really good guidance and framework for us to move forward. So I just wanted to reiterate what everyone else said as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Any further comments or questions on the paper? All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thank you. The next item is tab 15, Selwyn District Council Charitable Trust CCO exemption. Move Malcolm, seconded Bob. Any discussion on this topic? All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. The next item is the Tramway Reserve Trust CCO exemption. We have a mover and seconder. Move Shane, seconded Grant. Is there any discussion on this matter? No? All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. And we move to the resolution to exclude the public. Thanks to those that have joined us for the public portion of today's meeting, and we'll move to public excluded. We have a mover and seconder for moving into public excluded. Nicole and Bob, thank you. All those in favour say aye.